Oh my God.
Can they see
Here
us?
we go.
Oh, they
Yeah,
will.
I had to change the here. Know how these things work.
Okay, I'm going to ask everyone to stay muted while he's speaking. We are going to open it up for questions later. So, and if anybody has questions while he's speaking, feel free to put it in the chat, and we will we'll get to those questions when he's done with his reading. But thank you very much for coming tonight to our author talk. Dennis Donoghue, as many of you know, is a local author. He lives right here in Rowley. He has written this beautiful book, The Final 180, which is about his last year of teaching up in Salisbury before he retired after 37 years teaching. So I'm sure you can't imagine that. But he has written many things. His work has been published in many journals, magazines, and anthologies, including Blue Lake Review, Georgetown Review, Brandeis Review, Broad River Review, Full Circle Review. His latest short story, Luna's Reprieve, will be published in June in Blue Lake Review. That will be available online if you're interested in learning about that. He lives right here in Rowley with his wife, Carla Pansiera, which many of you probably know, and his daughters. And his book came out last year in May, just in time for the pandemic. So we're very glad that he could come and speak to us tonight about it, and we were able to make this happen. So I'm just going to turn it over to Dennis to talk about his book.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Amy. And I'm grateful to the Rowley Public Library for sponsoring this night. And I welcome all of you, and I'm very happy to see your faces. So here is, I am going to read 5 excerpts tonight, and I promise you they're not that long, so don't panic. My book chronicles my last year as a teacher, which was 2013 to 2014. And as Amy said, it was published by Adelaide Books last May in 2020. All right, so the first excerpt I'm going to read starts from the very beginning, and it talks about why I decided to write a memoir in the first place. The Final 180. A few years ago, the mother of one of my students, with nothing better to do, hid in a rhododendron near the school entrance and videotaped my 6th grade class jogging a couple of laps around the building. I'd taken the kids out for a short break, and being a runner myself, considered the workout a productive use of our time. This woman had other ideas. She sent the video to my principal and the district superintendent. She inquired as to why these children were not receiving the same amount of time on learning as students in other classes. To her shock, some ran without athletic footwear. As if that wasn't enough, she was certain I hadn't informed parents about missed instruction time and the risks inherent in vigorous exercise. Subsequently, I was reprimanded and told I could no longer take my class outdoors. My superintendent suggested I conduct something called brain gym, whereby students stood next to their desks and touched their toes. My principal added he would allow kids to run for a few minutes before the start of the school day, provided everyone passed in a signed permission slip and wore proper running shoes. At that point, I'd been a teacher for more than 3 decades and should have been used to anything. But having some fruitcake secretly record my class, only to have my supervisors agree with her, pushed me over the edge. A colleague who had uncovered the surveillance from her classroom window understood my outrage. Administrators always side with parents. She reminded me and recited her own horror stories to make me feel better. It didn't help. A week later, I was still paranoid and unsettled. Who else might be videotaping me? I found myself veering away from parents in the building and casting a leery eye on my supervisors. Had all those years I'd been part of the school setting, both as a teacher and a pupil, finally caught up with me, addling my brain so I could no longer think straight? Or was I sane enough and simply reacting to an unforeseen and ridiculous circumstance? For 53 years, from the time I entered kindergarten in September of 1961, I'd lived on the academic calendar, with the exception of a 6-week stint as a UPS delivery man in the fall of 1987, following 2 years teaching in an alternative high school, which left me determined never to set foot inside a school again. Rejoicing in June and despairing on Labor Day. Before the start of my last year, I decided to keep a journal to document daily observations and impressions in an attempt to learn something about myself and the profession to which I devoted so much of my life. While I'd come across many accounts from first-year teachers and journalists posing as such, I hadn't found any written by someone at the very end of his career who'd been around long enough to witness and reflect on the endless educational trends playing out on his students and colleagues. Yet, my aim wasn't to prove a point or take a stand. I had no desire to make sweeping declarations about the state of public education in America. Neither was I out to lose friends or gain enemies. I only wanted to show what it had been like for me, a teacher in his 37th year, as he weathered his final 180 days. By June, with any luck, my writing would expose common threads woven into a fabric of sorts. From that fabric, conclusions might be drawn, questions asked, opinions staked, and ultimately a story revealed. So I began at the beginning, the morning of convocation, when every teacher employed by the Triton Regional School District fought for a parking space in the high school lot, hurried into the cafeteria for a hard Danish and a cup of tepid coffee, and strolled upstairs to be fashionably late for the 9 o'clock start. All right. This second selection happens to be the first day of school. So we had convocation, and then we had a day of professional development. And the Tuesday after Labor Day was actually September 3rd was the first day of school. I met my students for the first time and informed them that not only was their last year at Salisbury Elementary School, next year they would be off to the middle school, it was also mine. What? What do you mean? Are you dying of something? I'm retiring. They sat in rows, scrubbed and expectant, hoping I would let them stay where they were, surrounded by their friends. Many were worried, having never had a male teacher before. We heard you're mean and make us run. I told them I wasn't mean, but we did run, though it was early in the morning and optional. Otherwise, they could stay in the classroom and do seat work. Then we'll run then. Were you only just kidding about retirement? Sometimes teachers like to say that. They expressed their good fortune at being able to tell people they would be my last class ever, which meant I would never forget them. Then they forgot about me and asked did I have a pencil sharpener, or could they go to the office to have a note signed, or what time can we eat snack, or you had my uncle's girlfriend, the one with the blonde hair. Do you remember her? To regain their attention, I bestowed privileges. No longer would they have to walk in line, eat snack at a designated time, get permission to use the bathroom. They were thrilled at the prospect of such freedoms. Finally, they could move from place to place without someone telling them to shut up and march single file, eat when they were hungry, and pee when they had the urge. Was this really true? Yes, I said, to which a chorus replied, then this will be our best year ever. For the bulk of the school day, we would be together. My colleague Adele next door taught 6D math and science, while I had her class for reading, writing, and geography. Of 6D's 21 members, 16 were white, 13 from dodgy backgrounds. A segment of the population lived in seasonal housing, including campgrounds. 1 in 6 of SES's 550 kids was homeless. Rates of drug use and domestic violence paralleled those of inner cities. and over half exhibited some impediment which affected classroom performance: shaky home life, learning disability, erratic behavior, past trauma, etc. Every class in the building reflected a similar composition, which meant that as much as we teachers loved the kids, those who didn't departed for easier populations. Their needs exhausted us by March, and some years by Christmas. We like to think we were all they had, which gave us a savior complex and in turn made us sick with guilt when we couldn't save them. But as the years went by, I learned that it was okay to give up on a kid, even healthy for both the kid in crisis and myself. Trying to save a hopeless case drained reserves better spent on someone with half a chance. No one went to cut a kid loose and redirect my energy elsewhere. It was a skill acquired over time. Take Charlie, for example, a student I had 6 years ago. Respectful, pudgy, depressed, with greasy hair that fell over his eyes. He slept all day, rarely lifting his head from the desktop. Whenever I woke him, he grumbled, opened his eyes, looked around to see where he was, and dozed right off again. His mother was crazy. She had a habit of railing at passing motorists on the town common. His father, a drug addict, long out of the picture. Charlie's troubles gave him insomnia, and though I liked him well enough, I took his snoring personally. Was I that boring a kid could snooze through my class every day? The other kids, meanwhile, saw it as a game, pestering me to wake him up and urging a consequence for his napping. This went on for a week or so until, out of ideas, I decided to leave him alone. Sleep was what Charlie needed most, I told his classmates, and the one place he could get what he needed was here. From then on, we let him sleep in peace. That spring, he somehow stayed awake long enough to not only complete the MCAS, but to pass it. The following September, when he visited me from middle school, where I assumed he continued to sleep, I learned he'd enjoyed our time together, even recalling some finer points of discussion, which had taken place while he dozed. I was both astonished and pleased that the year he'd spent with me hadn't been a total wash, despite my forsaking him. Okay. This next, where is it? This next excerpt takes place in October. I was reading The Tale of the Headless Horseman aloud, and I was explaining the difference between corporeal, meaning real, and spirit, meaning fake. After reading to the class an adapted version of The Tale of the Headless Horseman, I defined corporeal versus spirit, holding up the book as an example. This is real, corporeal. I slapped the whiteboard behind me. And this is real. From his seat, Blaine pointed to his groin. This is real. For his contribution to our discussion, I threw him out of the room. In the hallway, he made faces, prompting me to go out there to address the issue of his behavior, only to have him refuse to apologize. Why should he if he was just pointing to his stomach? You weren't pointing to your stomach, I said. I saw with my own 2 eyes. What did you see? I saw you point to your crotch. Why were you looking at my crotch? I was looking in that general direction. It wasn't my crotch, it was my stomach. Don't tell me it wasn't your crotch. It wasn't my crotch. From now on, do not point to yourself or any part of yourself for any reason whatsoever. Understood? I raised my voice to emphasize my point about not pointing. Meanwhile, the rest of them were going crazy, craning their necks, leaning out of their seats, busting to see how Blaine would worm his way out of this one. In response to my request, he offered a blank stare, the same one I'd seen countless times over the years, and always with the same message. Are you finished yet? Our confrontation left me with a headache and the realization that Blaine would continue to point, despite the promise I attempted to exact from him. He would continue to mouth off too. And I, after 36 plus years, would continue to allow myself to be drawn into exchanges like this, which led nowhere, bending down so we were eye to unblinking eye, only to see that it set me up, while also discovering how powerless I was after all his years of experience with people like me. He paraded back into the classroom, his status a good notch higher, and I followed, mine a good notch lower, trying to remember what the hell I'd been doing before all this, trying to figure a way to get us back on track. He eventually became one of my favorite students as those things happen. Okay. This next selection is from February, Valentine's Day, actually. I had taught the kids to meditate. We started with 1 minute, which was a huge challenge with 21 pretty, impulsive kids. And we worked up to 5 minutes, and they were always bugging me to see how far they could go. And I was kind of putting them off because I was pretty happy that they could do 5 minutes, and I wanted to keep it as a treat, that sort of thing. So finally, I relented on Valentine's Day. As it was Valentine's Day, for a treat, I agreed to play the longer meditation tape after promising to do so all year. 15 minutes was a considerable time for anyone to sit and breathe. For 21 antsy 12-year-olds, it was a challenge I wasn't sure they could handle. But they were game, so after giving the usual instructions, feet flat on the floor, shoulders relaxed, back straight, hands folded, eyes closed, I pressed the start button. With the lights off, we listened to a soothing female voice encouraging us to relax. Starting at the top of our heads, she would bring us all the way down to the tips of our toes. During our journey, I closed my eyes just enough to peek through my eyelashes. I wanted to make sure. What did I want to make sure? I wasn't sure. The kids were doing exactly what they'd been asked to do. They were following her instructions, inhaling and exhaling, sitting quietly with good posture. And yet, though they were just a few feet away from me, it was far from business as usual. Not far in, a deep calm settled over us, one we'd only brushed up against during the shorter sessions. Along with this came a subtle vibrancy, which agreed with them, but which unnerved me. It was clear they'd gone off somewhere, not caring whether I joined them. On their own, they'd become a cohesive unit, quietly breathing as if I wasn't there. Through my barely fluttering eyelids, I peeked out as random thoughts flew through my head. Was this even okay? What if the superintendent should mosey on by? What about a fire drill or a lockdown? What would their parents say when they went home with this latest bit of news? There wasn't a sound, but for that female voice telling us to loosen our knees and relax our ankles. I sat facing them as someone who, like them, was tapping into a stillness that had been there all along. What came over me dissolved my role as a teacher and their roles as people taught by me. Though they weren't looking at me, their eyes were closed, I sensed their awareness sharper than ever. Simply sitting silently and breathing together, we had moved beyond the sum of our parts, becoming everything and nothing at the same time. I kept on with my breathing, releasing those crazy thoughts, along with the idea of my role as someone who needed to have things a certain way, who'd spent his life judging his own actions and the actions of everyone around him, and who by doing so was not so slowly driving himself insane. All of it, I realized, was completely unnecessary. After our 15 minutes were up, they came to in their own time, some continuing to meditate, while others blinked or stretched or glanced around, eventually recognizing and tuning into their surroundings. After our 5-minute sessions, some kids volunteered to describe what they'd experienced, trying to make sense of thoughts racing through their minds, or saying how relaxed they felt, or how a rich memory or dream they'd forgotten spraying into consciousness. But there was none of that now. Everyone content to sit and in no hurry to do anything. A few more minutes passed without a sound. The silence was both awkward and refreshing, and so far into the running of a classroom, I felt as if I wasn't doing my job. Whereas during the school day, they clamored to be heard, and so their pleas lost in the din, while I struggled to get their attention, my pleas lost in that same din. Now, finally, we had what we wanted from one another. We sat together saying nothing for a bit longer before I got up from my chair and turned the lights back on. All right. Can you get that on the screen? This final selection takes place on May 28th, near the end of the year. All spring, it had been 60 to 70 degrees. And on the afternoon of May 28th, the temperature shot up to 85. Today was 85 degrees, 15 degrees warmer than it had been all spring. Only last week, I'd given my portable heater to Adele. Next year, she would have 2 portable heaters going, a double violation of the fire code. Windows were supposed to stay closed because of the non-existent AC. Vanquished by the sultry conditions, I opened them on the scant chance of catching a breeze. Because of their size, they were drafty and icy to the touch in winter, and functioned as magnifying glasses right now, desiccating a stack of vocabulary quizzes I left on the sill. Warm air flowed into the room, but at least it was moving. The kids groaned and protested. "Shut them windows! Are you trying to kill us?" I left them open. The worksheets are distributed. They folded into fans to wave under their chins. "You can't make us work in this heat. It's hotter in here than it is outside. We can't even breathe." They had me and they knew it. In their eyes, I was the one person responsible for the misery we found ourselves in. In response to their silent accusations, I hated every one of them. The depth of my loathing frightened me. Engaging in debate would only serve to make them more indignant and piss me off even further. The heat had shrunk the room to a shoebox and amplified body odor, so that it was even tougher to draw a breath. With 2 hours to go before dismissal and no one coming to save us, we were in serious trouble. Suddenly, as happens in desperate moments when everything is lost, nature, the divine, or just plain dumb luck intervened. Something flew through the window, something big and scary looking. Whatever it was, glided in slow figure eights between the 2 rows of ceiling lights. Charcoal black with a greenish tinge, ping pong ball size with translucent wings. This creature climate change had delivered from the Amazon River basin, droned around the room as if cruising beneath a jungle canopy. Corbin noticed it first and dove on the floor. The rest of them screamed and threw themselves under their desks for cover, pleading to be rescued. I watched in amazement while going on about how every sentient being served a purpose on this earth and had a right to exist. The same speech I gave whenever anything flew or crawled into 6D and was about to be annihilated. "Not this one," cried Bryn. "You have to kill it, Mr. D." She was truly terrified. And whatever the creature was, it seemed equally frightened of us, keeping its distance, climbing up near the ceiling tiles and staying there in a holding pattern. I grabbed the broom in an attempt to redirect it back out into the world. Slow and lumbering, the cargo plane of the insect world, it had first outmaneuvered my efforts, though I did manage to nudge it from behind with the bristles so that it dipped and rode the warm current, carrying it back into the wild. Tanner jumped up and raced to slam every window in the room. Everyone cheered. "How did you do that, Mr. D? How did you tap it on the butt like that?" They regarded me with awe. I shrugged. I had no idea. Only one teacher, they cried, would know what to do in a situation like that. That teacher is you, Mr. D. I bowed. I loved them. I truly did. They were only 12 years old, so unbelievably young and new to this life. And how was it reasonable to expect much from them? Anything, really, when they were doing the best they could at their tender ages. My heart softened, maybe from the heat, maybe from the drama, but it softened. I asked, were they okay? They nodded. I then declared a truce, though I never used the word, at least they think we were equals. As a class, we discussed what had just happened. It was only some sort of weird bug on steroids was all, minding its own business when its GPS screwed up. How about we write a story pretending we were that bug who'd just flown into a classroom full of crazy kids? What did it see, hear, smell, think? That would make one heck of a story, wouldn't it? They thought so. And can we draw what it looked like too? Flynn asked me. Thank you. Thank you for the, what's next for you?
Okay, well, thank you. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Donoghue, if you want to put them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself at this point and chat with him a little bit, he's would love to get some of your questions. Anybody want to speak up first?
Hi, this is Tony. Dennis, do you love retirement?
Yes, it agrees with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Very much.
Yes, yeah, that's great.
Dennis, can I talk to him?
Yeah, go ahead.
Dennis, you've earned a Purple Heart all these years, definitely.
Yeah, well, I'm not the first teacher. I think teaching is a really tough occupation, and
Oh, yes.
I see some teachers here actually in the crowd.
That was wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. And
You have colleagues here, Dennis?
what's that?
Do you have former colleagues looking in?
Yeah, yes, I do. Oh yeah, there's Connie back from Woburn in the 80s, 90s, Connie.
Oh,
She's
nice.
living the life down in Truro. And Maz, who else? Raise your hand. There's another-
So Dennis, I'm gonna ask, what's the
Carl.
best advice you've ever given to one of your students?
Come to school.
Up, show up. Go Bruins!
Yeah, that too. You know, I don't, you know.
No, it's gotta be better than that, come on.
Let's see, be good to your mother.
Someone in the
Good
chat,
to me,
some-
actually, don't piss me off, that's probably,
Don't piss you off, okay,
Yeah.
don't piss the teacher off, gotcha.
yeah.
someone in the chat asks if you ever substitute. Do you go back and substitute?
I did that once for 6 weeks, and it was actually in Georgetown. I'm not sure why I did that. I'll leave it at that, but I'm good as done with that profession.
Someone else is asking where the book can be sold, can be found. Where can they find it?
Amazon, it's on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get it.
Great job, Deno.
Thank you.
Good job, Deno.
That's a big one for me.
Really fun, Dennis. Really fun
Going up
listening
the
to you read.
homies.
So thank you.
Did you know, Dennis, Nora and Chris Sweeney are on this as well?
Oh, great. Yeah. I think there's more people. I just can't see everybody.
Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
Oh, there's
Oh,
Nora.
there she is. Hi, Nora.
Hey, that was great.
Thank you.
I was
very
just
much.
I was just laughing by myself here
I
in my
couldn't
house
hear
in LA.
anything. I'm like, I couldn't hear people's responses, so it was kind of weird, but I figured.
Hi,
you were-
Dennis. That was great. It's Johanna and Rich. Awesome, Dennis. We
Oh,
Right. there you
hi,
go.
Shandy.
really did
Oh,
read a day-to-day book, read a really important story.
It really
Thank
did.
you.
We love the book. Hi, Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
Dennis,
Yes.
I read every chapter every night. You got me through the first phase of COVID.
Well,
laughed
glad to hear
Every
that.
single solitary night.
Yeah, it came out just in time, right when people were ready to give up, and it landed in their mailboxes, and a lot of lives were saved because of the laughter. So I did credit for turning the pandemic around with my book.
I'm gonna start it all over again.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Dennis, this is Dom. I never ask you any serious questions, but I have a question.
Don't start now.
How many hours did it take to write this book?
3 years.
Wow.
So here's what happened. My last year, I kept a journal, and I wrote in it every day about what happened during the year and during the day, particular day. And on some days, I actually had it with me. So during a planning period, if the kids were at gym or whatever, and there was something that went on, I just bulleted the whole thing. And from that journal, I spent 3 years developing it into a memoir. So I didn't show it to anybody. I show my short fiction to Carla, and she helps me critique it before I send it out. But with this particular piece, I had never written a full-length memoir, and it was probably 350 pages. So I found 6 or 8 publishers, and I looked up how, what I need to do. So they all wanted a query letter, meaning how can we sell this book? Tell us how we can sell it. So my angle was, well, this is from a teacher who's at the end of his career. You're not going to find many books like this. So, and then I also included the first 30 pages of the manuscript. And then, if you're a writer, you send this stuff off, and sometimes you hear back, sometimes you never hear back. Sometimes it's good news. Most of the time it's a rejection. That's how it works. So I heard about a month later from Stefan Nikolic from Adelaide Books. He said, hey, I like this. Let's see the rest of the manuscript. So I showed it to Carl. I'm like, whoa. And then I sent the rest of the manuscript. And like 2 weeks later, he says, I'd like to publish it, send your contract, whatever. And I was stunned because it just went in the slush pile with everybody else's. I didn't have an agent or anything like that. So that's kind of how it came to be. For any writers out there, never give up. I'm 65. I got my first book published. So,
Salute.
so whatever.
Dennis, I wanted to mention that teaching is such a rich experience, and we want to thank you for encapsulating that in such a full, glorious manner. I mean, it's just a wonderful, wonderful tone to reflect on.
Well, thank you, Maz. Maz and Melanie and I were graduate students at Leslie College in 1978. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, a lot of quite a few years of as I say, rich experiences.
Yeah, retired teachers yourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So.
We had a couple more questions in the chat. Someone asked, what's a typical day for you now that you are retired?
Okay, well, I write twice a day. Now, a lot of that is getting easily distracted. As anybody who writes or does art or music or theater or anything, it's like you have to stay focused. And writing to me has always been about doggedness, like not so much talent, but just being able to do it every day and always having faith that you have a story and you have something to say and not getting down by rejections. And I mean, there's publishing, which is one thing, and then there's actually the craft, which is another. And I'm fortunate to be married to a writer. So we talk about this constantly, the highs and lows of publication. Is this even worth it? But we both know, because we live to write, that it is worth it. And that's why we do it every day. And it's so great with Carla because I have a fantastic editor right in the house that I could show her stuff and I look at her stuff. So, so that's a big part of my day. And I became a CNA, believe it or not. So I work a couple shifts a week up at.
So, Dennis, I kind of want to follow up on that. Have you taken anything from when you were teaching to being a CNA? Have you, like, is anything that you brought from your teaching abilities to be a CNA? Is that
a great question? Actually, there are a lot in common. You know, I mean, being a CNA is kind of like being a teacher. You know, taking care of people, whatever. I'm finding out the longer I do it, the more it has in common with teaching, because you deal with behaviors too. For anyone who's ever been in a nursing home, you deal with behavior.
Well, I don't think there's been a lot of teachers that transcend to being CNAs. So
yeah, probably not. Probably not. I don't know. They find other things to do. So.
Dennis?
Someone also asked, did you ever have to truly discipline the kids?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I like to, I thought my strength as a teacher was to be able to get somebody to come to terms with their behavior by reasoning with them, And I also, like in the book, I talk a lot about once you raise your voice as a teacher, it's all over for you. You can't run a classroom if you are somebody that is not in control of your emotions. You have to stay on an even keel. And I tried to do that as a teacher. And I try to teach the kids that. That's why I taught them to meditate and to, we would try to get them outside for exercise and things that would, I was trying to preach self-control all the time. So.
One more question so far in the chat. In the 37 years, do you look back on a special group of teachers or a school that you really felt you were in a great educational system?
I love the 15 years I was in Salisbury. I made a lot of great friends there and met a lot of great kids. And I would say it was really, when I retired, I kind of knew it was time for me to go. I was in an earlier retirement. It was called Retirement Plus. So I was able to get out after 37 years. And at the same time, I knew I was really going to miss the people. I'm still good friends with many of the teachers there. And I see the kids around now. They're in their 20s, 30s. I run into them from time to time. And that was a great place for me. It was a tough place, but it was a really good place for me. I felt like I really made some connections there.
Another question from the chat. Hey, Den, as I read the book, I heard your voice, but this has been a treat. Here's my question. You've watched your wife teach this past year, which has been trying to say the least. Do you think about how it would have been to have taught during this freaking pandemic?
I could not have done it. There's no way. I needed like 5 people just to help me Zoom tonight. I got my wingman right here. Say hi.
boo.
No. And I'll tell you, some of the older crowd that I'm looking at right now, I think they'd be pretty helpless too if they had to Zoom. I think it's very difficult now. It's a whole new world of teaching, and it is just not easy for teachers. And I couldn't have done it. There's no way I could have done it. And I mean, I don't know how Carla does it. She comes home with some stories that are unbelievable. And it's been a tough year, a very tough year. The whole thing, social distancing, vaccines, all that stuff for teachers is just a lot. So.
Okay, I've got one more question from the chat. Hi, Uncle Deno. You mentioned that it is sometimes okay to give up on a kid, both for your well-being and the students. How many years into teaching did it take for you to realize this and be okay with it?
Well, that example that I gave, technically I gave up on him, but, I felt like that was what he needed. that was what that kid needed, as strange as it is to say that. He needed a safe environment where he could just put his head down and get some sleep, and the other kids wouldn't bug him. And I knew what his outside life was like. I knew it. I knew what was going on, and I didn't see the point of bugging that kid all day. So, in a way, I didn't feel like I was giving up on him. I thought I was giving him what he needed, certainly more than listening to me go on all day. I guess when I talk about giving up on a kid, I think what I really mean is finding an alternate way of meeting that kid's needs. Schools tend to meet everybody's needs in the same way, and obviously that doesn't work for many, many kids, and you got to kind of figure the kid out and meet the kid's needs that way. So.
Dennis, I think you got to do an audiobook if you ever can.
Well, maybe you could be the voice, Nora.
I can record it, but I think you should be the voice.
Okay, thank you for the offer. I'll fly to, where are you, in Cincinnati?
No, in Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm on my way.
Okay.
I'm gonna second that, Dennis. I've been reading the book and it's great. I can hear you in my head, but you in person are much better. So
Oh, thank you.
you need to team up with Nora, I think.
All right, thank you very much.
There's no one that can, you just have that voice. It's perfect.
How about a podcast, Dennis?
Yeah.
There you go.
I like the idea of a Dennis podcast, a regular one on life.
Will you guys tune in?
Yeah,
Great. All
that
right.
accent for sure.
I'm in. Get a podcast going. I'm
Need a
in.
big for his
No,
head.
can you help him produce it, please? Because
I'm
Yeah,
not
I'll
gonna
do
we're
it.
wiped out from
for
the
him.
Zoom.
We will. We will. Nora will help.
We'll get some makeup on him too.
Yeah, I could use some. I could use a makeover.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. If anyone else would like to make any comments, just go ahead and unmute yourself. But you've got a lot of nice comments in the chat, Dennis, lots of
Thank you.
compliments. So thank you very much for doing this for us. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and it was fun.
Thank you, Dennis. Great job.
Dennis.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Great
Dennis.
job,
That was
Dan.
great.
Dennis.
Good job.
Bye.
Way to go, Big D. Way to go.
Hey, G.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, Pat Pat.
Hi,
Bye.
everyone. Can't see me, but I can see you.
No.
Who's leaving who? Althea, get your fat ass face out of the way.
Nice.
This is Jackie's friend Annie from New York. And I just wanted to let you know this was just delightful.
Oh, thank you.
I was laughing a lot and also horrified at the woman in the rhododendrons.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, life of a teacher.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This was great.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ruthie and Chris.
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Boston. Hi, Dennis. It was great.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
We're your followers from Cincinnati.
I know you guys. I know you are. You look fantastic.
We'll have to tune in June for the next story that's coming.
Oh, you can just, it's right online on Blue Lake Review.
Okay, that's where the
It'll
9
pop-
Jakes was too.
June 1st, it'll pop right up. You'll see it.
In June. Okay.
June 1st, yeah, you
Oh,
can't.
June 1st. Okay.
I'm looking forward to a CNA story.
Okay, well, that could be the next one.
Me too.
Yes.
Hey, Jackie.
Hi, you all.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Bye, Mom.
See everyone.
See you, Carl. Bye, Dan.
All right, bye, Jack.
So long, Dan. Hey, Dan, this is Dell. I just can't figure out how to get my camera working, but I just want to let you know
well,
I was seeing you. You can see my
Yeah.
picture there. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a fine looking picture.
Yeah, right. It's great to see Mars and Nell. Haven't seen you guys in a long
I
time.
can't wait till they come up here.
All right.
When's that?
Yeah, we'll see you soon, probably like mid-July.
Oh,
We're
definitely.
looking forward to it and to hear more,
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, to exchange.
I'll be fun. That'll be great.
Mars and Mel, I hope